Just be nice if something fucking worked.
Yes, I agree. But this is YouTube we're dealing with.
Oh, finally. There we go. We're live. Alrighty. So, hello, people. I'm just getting our stuff situated here, as the technology gods, of course, are doing nothing to help us today. This is the first in a series of live streaming of customization of Nendoroids. So we're going to be doing this once a week, every week on Saturday, and you can bring your projects along with you and get tips and tricks as we go, and yeah, just kind of have a good time and see what kind of possibilities there are for Nendoroid customs. This series is going to be centered around doing a custom set of Wizard of Oz figures using Nendoroid parts that are going to be kind of a anime-inspired variant. So we'll see how things are going. And the technical aspect of getting this stream up and running might be touch and go. So people, if they're popping in, give us any ideas how things are looking or sounding on your end. That would be helpful. So, all right.
And thank you for being here.
Yes, there's April with our little piggy. One of such piggies.
Where's the camera? Oh, there's the camera.
It's a big delay.
There will be a piggy on your screen.
Yes, and this is a...
Woo! There's a piggy.
An Abigail.
Abigail! Look at her. She's like trying to sniff. She's like, is it edible? Can I eat it? Okay.
Alrighty, so I think I will go ahead and quickly do a post on Instagram just to let people know that the stream is up and it is at a different website address. As frustrating as that is, I started it all up, got it all up and running, and then there was a hiccup in OBS and I ended up goofing up and starting and ending the broadcast. So, taking a photo, making a quick announcement. And then, of course, I've got my handy dandy. Be back soon. Let's see what we got going here. There we go. Alright, making our Instagram post, letting everybody know that we are now up and running. Okay. So, basically, what I've got here, I'm going to be doing 4 figures. Let me grab my other window so I can see what I'm doing here.
And my only feedback on the stream is that the image is very washed out.
Yeah.
Like it's reflecting off the white.
Yeah, it's very blue.
Yes. So you might want to, as you show things, lay it out on the wooden background.
Yeah. Let's see if I can turn this off. Might work out better for this. There we go. We'll do this part this way. Gotta have the fancy spotlight for when we're doing our detailed work. But basically, I'm going to be doing 4 different figures during the series. Going to be doing Dorothy, the Tin Man, the Lion, and the Scarecrow, of course, our classic 4 characters. And we're going to be doing a variety of different customization techniques, from just very simple color change using, basic parts that already have pretty much everything that we want for them, to doing, full sculpt and major alterations and kind of everything in between. So you get a good assessment of lots of different techniques and tools and materials for this process. So starting with our Tin Man here, we're going to kind of go over kind of what parts I've assembled and what they're from, just so people kind of have an idea. The Tin Man basically is going to consist majorly of a Mecha Woozer, Rin's Mecha Woozer from Woozer Hand to Mouth Life. And I have already done a little bit of customization, just pretty much taking the arms off that it came with, which was the little grab claw arm. You can just pop right off. And the drill arm that came with it originally. And I am using the grabby claw arms from a Takikoma from Ghost in the Shell. And oddly enough, the peg that actually came on that fits really well inside the hole that was already there. So, bonus. Just popped in, and actually still allows good rotation.
If you want to show them.
Ah, yes. Yes, that's the Takikoma. And basically just popped the arms right off the front of it. Thank you. So yes, the arms are still, completely posable. They do pop off quite a bit, because of course we're not made for this purpose. You can, of course, glue them in place so that they're kind of permanently there, but I think this is pretty sufficient for this part of the purpose. Also, of course, the Tin Man needs his axe, which is from Paul Bunyan from Fate, and handily just kind of will hold it right on the shoulder without any special attachments or anything, so that'll be pretty cute. We're going to go through kind of doing a little bit of cleanup to some of these marks. My intention is to do a little bit of kind of rust texture painting kind of along the edges and making them look a little bit more worn in spots. I'm going to do kind of a little bit of a gender swap on the 3 guys that are in the entourage, and do kind of a basically a little collection of gals. And we're going to do the little cone helmet, little funnel helmet that's, kind of signature to the Tin Man with a little bow on it. And that one we're going to be using plasticard, which are basically like little sheets of plastic in various thicknesses. And I'll talk a little more about that kind of as we go along. But yeah, so that is the main body that is going to be used for Tin Man, and the axe, of course. We have got a heart here from Lavi from D. Gray Man. This attached to his eye, but or kind of underneath the hair, so it's kind of right in front of his eye. But we're going to convert this to be the heart clock for the Tin Man. And then we have got a watering can from Can Coal 430 and 431. Forget which names they were, but 2 different ones use this little watering can that we're going to basically use in place as the oil can for the Tin Man. Then we've got a bow from Ranka from Across Frontier, which is her little on her microphone holding hand. we're going to pop the bow off of that and utilize that for a little stylistic point on it. And that pretty much sums up the Tin Man in a nutshell. There'll be a lot of other things as we go along, but those are kind of the basic building blocks of making that work. Next one is going to be the Scarecrow. This one's going to be more techniques on this one are going to involve a lot more tear down and build up and reshaping. So we'll be using stuff like the tools like our little rotary tool or handy dandy Dremel. And these guys are really indispensable if you're going to be doing any kind of, moderate to heavy converting. Because with this one, we're taking a body here from Shifuya from Tokyo Revengers. And I just kind of liked the bulk, kind of the bulky outfit. And we're going to basically be kind of grinding down the features, making him, a little more rounded in the parts, and just kind of conveying that kind of baggy clothing kind of look that the Scarecrow has. And then I'm going to, once it's all kind of shaped and built up, I'm going to use some terrain bits, which I thought I had here, but I do not see them. Let me see here. No. I don't see them at the moment, but I have some little textured grass tufts, some kind of straw-like things that I'm going to basically kind of work along the inside of the sleeve here and in between where the jacket connects, like the Scarecrow has. And then the head is going to be modified from Aang from Last Airbender, with his bald head, and we're going to do kind of some button eyes and a big smile. And then the hat here is going to be, let's see, who was that from? Scarecrow's hat from Roxy from Migurdia, if I said that right. And it is, a pristine looking hat. So we're going to be doing a lot of cutting and grinding to really kind of tatter up the edges of the hat and kind of create some more little, seams where we can kind of carve in or mold on it, little stitch marks along the edges of the hat and stuff. So we're going to basically, kind of weather that. And that's going to go on top of the Aang head. You won't need those other face plates, but just use this guy. And then it's basically just going to pop onto the head there and be modified. And then around the neck, we're going to use our putty to sculpt kind of the frill of the bag head. The Scarecrow kind of has his sack filled with straw on his head, and then it has kind of the tuft of the bag around the neck and draped onto the shoulders. And so we'll sculpt that out with our putty, and we'll go over that stuff more as we go along. So that's the head, the body, the hat. Oops, and I'm dropping spare parts here. And then of course we have a little scroll, which was from Shenzhou, from Canal Towns. And that's going to serve as the diploma, or his brains. And then, let's see, body, head, hat, scroll. That pretty much sums up the building blocks for the Scarecrow. Now the Cowardly Lion. We're using a Saber Lion. Body and head, of course. This is an example of using existing parts just as is and swapping out a few components. With this, my intent is basically to use a bow from Madoka Magica and stick that kind of on the hoge, or stick it out of the hole here on the top so that it has the little bow, just kind of characteristic on the Cowardly Lion. Has that little bow at the top of his head, but this one's going to be a little more prominent. And then the the face, we're going to be going with the Mayuri from Steins Gate, a little chibi-eyed cat smile type face, which I think will look pretty cute in there. All right, so that will handle the body and the face. The what else do we have? Oh yes, of course, the medal of courage, which is going to be Yuri or Victor's gold medal from Yuri on Ice. So we'll be integrating that in. And that pretty much sums up the Cowardly Lion. Lion's pretty simple. There's not going to be a huge amount of conversion involved in that, so it's going to illustrate how easy it is to actually make some basic customs with Nendoroid parts. Then last but not least, of course, is Dorothy. And Dorothy's going to be illustrating quite a few different techniques, some of which are going to be a bit more advanced because we're going to be doing resculpt and remolding and resculpting of a lot of stuff with the hair and some other components. Where's her list? All right, so basically we have got, of course, a Toto, little dog from, I can't even pronounce the name, Kudri Auka Winter?
Little Busters.
Little Busters, thank you. So, got him. And then we have a little basket here from Mamako from Do You Love Your Mom and Her Multi-Target Attacks? Greatest title ever. And with this one, the little basket, we're actually going to be able to kind of bore out the internal parts. And we're going to kind of see and test as we go along because I think he could actually, his lower half could actually fit inside the bag while she's kind of holding it. If not, the head, of course, is pretty easily removable. And so we're going to replicate the neck peg right inside the edge of the basket there so you can have the little head like he's poking up out of the basket, which will be really cute. So we'll have that for Toto. We're using a Hermione Granger faceplate for Dorothy, which is pretty fitting, I think. Nice brown eyes, just like Judy Garland had. The eyelashes. I think that makes a cute option for that. From Harry Potter, of course. The dress is going to be from Marissa from Toho Project. And this one we're going to be doing a little bit of grind down to kind of remove the buttons. And you have to basically carve off the whole apron portion here to kind of reproduce the signature dress and, of course, paint the shoes. We could go either classic MGM and make them ruby or use the traditional silver slippers from the books. We'll figure that out as we go along. Probably go with the traditional movie recognizable ones. But that will be the dress. Now the hair is going to be the heaviest conversion involved here. We have two different pieces from two different Nendoroids, and this one's been previously worked with by somebody, and we, bought it cheap and a lot, but still good. We have a lot of stuff on our website that is listed as is, listed poor, just because they've been either modified heavily like this, or they've got, some broken parts or scratches and that kind of thing, but they're perfect for this purpose, which is customization. The hair back piece is from Homura, from Madoka Magica. The front hair, I'm not certain of, because I actually just got it out of our miscellaneous parts bin. It hadn't been listed yet. I do recognize it, I just can't quite place it. But at any rate, as you can see, the pieces are not going to fit together on their own as it is, so we're going to have to do a fair amount of kind of carve down on the inside here on the tabs to kind of get it to slip in, a little bit of prep work. And then once that fits in well, there's going to be, you can see since they're both not straight, the back hair, the Toho of the Homura hair is flat, and this part here has a little bit of a V shape, so we're going to be doing a little bit of fill-in with the putty and kind of get that in place. And then, of course, if we're doing this kind of semi like the MGM Dorothy, she doesn't really have bangs, so we're going to be doing kind of a carve down of the side hair here to where it matches just over the ear, because her hair is kind of pulled back over the ear into the ponytail. And then the same thing kind of with the bangs, we're going to be kind of carving them back to reveal a little bit more of the forehead, and then filling in with putty to kind of flatten out all of the surfaces here. The thing with the putty that is kind of neat, this is basically a two-part putty, two-part epoxy, where you have your A and your B types. You take just a little bit of each, and then you put them together. The blue putty here is the hardening agent. So when you put them together, they will eventually harden up, and once they've cured overnight, they'll be rock hard. But the neat thing about it is that they're a little bit tough to work with initially, but once you mix it all up and do a little glob, and then you just kind of let it dry, for about a half hour or so, then it becomes a little less tacky and it firms up, and you can kind of work it where you want it and just kind of let it dry just a little bit and keep reworking until you get it the way you want it. This guy, basically, we're going to be, doing all that fill-in stuff and modification, and we'll kind of go through and cover how to work with that putty. But that is the gist of all of the parts that we are going to be using in this process. So we'll go ahead and lay things out here a little bit and get our tray out of the way. We'll avoid using our spotlight here as much as we can, because it's picking up rather blue. But all of our little parts ready to go. All right, so other than the parts that you need, of course, since we're doing the carving and remodeling, you got your milliput, sandpaper. You need a couple of different grades. You need kind of a really rough grit here. How big is this? I'm not sure how high this was. I think this is probably a 80 grit or 100 grit, and then this is your 2000 grit, really smooth finishing sandpaper. This stuff's good for kind of tearing down minor and moderate features, and then this stuff is good for kind of smoothing out and finishing things. You're gonna want, no, not a cat. We don't need a cat, thank you. We're gonna want a X-Acto blade, of course. And, of course, make sure the blade's fresh. You need it nice and sharp, but, of course, always be careful. Nice thing with the plastic on Nendoroids is that they are fairly easy to cut through. So, doing kind of your basic blade towards you with the thumb, kind of like carving method, it doesn't meet with a huge amount of resistance if you go slow about it. As opposed to model kit plastic, like Warhammer and Warhammer Fantasy models are made with a much more rigid plastic, and that stuff could be really hard to cut through. So this stuff is, a lot more pliable, a lot more rubbery, so it's generally pretty easy to get through with the X-Acto knives. We also want a assortment of different, shapes and sizes of files. To kind of get into, little nooks and crannies to kind of refine the shapes of things and carve down features you don't want. And then a assortment of little drill bits is also pretty handy, because a lot of times you're going to want to, carve little holes into things that you'll be, gluing additional parts onto, such as bows and that kind of thing. And then, of course, you're going to want brushes in a variety of different sizes there. There's also a huge variety of not only sizes, but of qualities of brushes. The main thing you look at with brushes is, do you want synthetic or do you want natural fiber brushes? Now, natural fiber brushes are going to be a lot more expensive. The ones I've always used in the past are Winsor and Newton Series 7 sable brushes, and they're about 30 bucks a piece. But the nice thing about the natural fiber brushes versus something like this kit, which was, I think it was like $24 for the whole set of brushes. The nice thing about the natural fiber ones is that they don't curl at the tip nearly as quickly as synthetic brushes do. I have a set here of these same brushes that I've been using for a little while now, and a lot of them I've had to trim the tips of because they have done a fair amount of curling at the points, which of course is hard to see, but that tends to happen with less expensive brushes. The cheaper the brush, the quicker it's going to curl, basically. With the natural fiber ones, you can use a little bit of just hair conditioner, like you would use in the shower, and dip the brushes and kind of wipe it off before your next use, and then rinse them out before you use them. And that helps kind of keep the fibers in good condition and makes them last a little longer. But for the price of a kit like this, just as long as you're keeping them clean, they'll last you a little while, and they're not expensive at all to replace. So for this project, we're going to go with the simpler brushes. Then of course we have paints to consider. Got a whole set up here of Army Painter acrylic paints, water-based paints. This is basically the easiest thing to work with because it is water-based. You can thin it out, you can wash it off, wipe it up, and it's less hassle than working with oil or solvent-based paints, which can also act oddly with the plastic if you're using a type of paint that isn't really rated for use with plastic. Especially with the solvent-based ones, sometimes you get things that are going to cause warping or staining of plastics in unpredictable ways. So watercolor is always the better way to go. Army Painter is a good set. I used to use Games Workshop paints all the time when I was doing 40K miniatures and such, and they honestly did a great job overall, but they were built in a way that as soon as you open them, they have a shelf life of about 3 months, and they are $5-6 a bottle. They might even be more now. But yeah, these are about $3 a bottle if you buy them from Army Painter. They're about $7 a bottle if you get them on Amazon. You can get a whole kit on Amazon that has everything here, and that's going to be a lot more affordable to do it that way, especially if you're just starting out. But they give you the full spectrum of the basic colors, and then they also give you washes, which basically are a kind of coloring that will go over the surface and tend to shade in the recesses, the deep parts of the model, will give it a little more depth, and then just kind of washes off of the surface. So you'll have an assortment of those in different browns and then specific color tones, and then they've got an assortment of metallic paints, which with the metallics you really got to shake these guys up a lot. Most of these have little ball bearing mixers in them that you can shake around and helps mix up really well. Those ones you'll shake a lot to get them flowing real well because they tend to separate really easily. And then it also has a few of texture paints, which these guys will go on just like a traditional paint, but they will dry differently, and then they kind of build up in to actual physical texture a little bit after they dry. And so that's a good feature for, like rust. And we'll be using this with the Tin Man a little bit to kind of give him some weathered look to it. Other than the brush set that I showed you before, some other brushes that are kind of nice to have are dry brushes. Now you could actually just get some cheap makeup brushes as well. That would serve the same function, but these guys basically you'll use to just put a tiny bit of paint, and you just basically dry it off on the palette or on the paper towel, and just so you have just a little dusting of color on there, and then you're kind of basically just blushing it onto the figure, and that's how you get really subtle kind of drier effects. Would be good for doing blush on face plates and that kind of thing. Let's see what else. Oh yes, the paint palette. Now let's shift this back down. This is a wet palette. It's basically just a little tray that has a kind of spongy foam insert into it that you just soak with water. Not to where it's like dripping wet, but you get it in there so it's nice and damp. And then you put a piece of tissue paper that is basically like wax paper, and that just lays right down on top of that tray. And this is where you're going to basically put in your drops of color and mix them up. And this palette actually will keep those paints viable for weeks. Actually, I was painting some Warhammer 40k models recently, and I'll just paint a little bit, 20-30 minutes at a time, and then I'll close this up and set it aside, and then come back the next day, and the paints inside are still wet and workable. So this is definitely a better method than just putting a glob of paint on a palette and working with it until it goes dry or until you're done, and then washing it all out. That'll make your paints last a lot longer and save you on materials, which is nice. So all it takes is just putting the cover on. And these also can be bought inside starter kits with the army painter stuff, and can be bought on their own as well. So there are a lot of different other tools that we might go through kind of as we go and as we need them. But those are kind of the basics of what you need to get going on things. Let's see. We'll probably go in and kind of review the dry brush, or not the dry brush, the airbrush, because we do have. I've got a kit of airbrush paints here, which are a little different than the standard brush acrylics. They're, thinner, of course, because they have to go through a airbrush. But basically, you got your separate paints for that purpose. And we'll be doing that to kind of highlight the hair. And that would be kind of the main purpose, would be that, and maybe doing some highlighting work on the Scarecrow hat, probably. So once we cross that bridge, we'll kind of go over the airbrush and how that all works. Let's see here. Yeah, so that's the basics. Of course, you'll want your paint rag on the side here for wiping things off, and I've got my handy little Rudolph paint cup here, which you'll want for rinsing out your brushes. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started here with a little bit of prep work on what we're going to do with some of this converting business. So I think the best thing to do is to start simple, and we'll go ahead and start with the Cowardly Lion. So we'll get all those parts for the lion situated here, and move everything else kind of out of the way. So we got our heart. Well, that's for the Tin Man. That's the metal. Oh, there's the face. There we go. And the bows. Okay. So first we'll pop our little lion hood out here. Again, this is from Saber Lion from Fate, one of the many iterations of it. So that'll make a perfect little headwear. And of course, being an older faceplate, this one will pop right in without much problem. Might have to make some modifications here, but we'll see. Oh, there we go. No, that's cute. There. I'll have to shield the light when I'm showing stuff. That looks cute. So there we go for that. Okay, we got our Cowardly Lion body. Very cute. And our gold medal there. So we're doing just kind of a basic parts fitting to see kind of how everything is going to go together and what adjustments, if anything, we're going to have to make. Okay. So there's our metal. Now, as you can see, it's not going to lay down cleanly because of the bow here, so we're going to end up stripping that bow off of the chest so that the metal can lay down. But that is that. And then we got our Madoka bows, which we're going to trim and kind of situate there on the Hoge. And of course, we're going to, trim down some other parts of it and kind of do some patching work. Now, this is an older figure, of course, so the bow is a little bit sticky, which is always lovely with the older figures. So just taking a dry cloth will usually get most of that off, and then you don't have to fuss with it. There we go. Okay, so now with this one, we aren't going to really need the little trailing bits. So we're just going to trim those off with the X-Acto here. Now this kind of rubbery plastic board can be got at any crafting store. It's usually in like the drafting supplies area with the compasses and X-Acto blades and that kind of thing a lot of the time. And it's a perfect cutting mat so you don't carve up your table. Unless, of course, you have a craft table like this one where it doesn't really matter. So now we're just going to kind of clean up the trim work. Okay, so there's that. Okay, now it's got basically a pretty thick piece here that where the peg of the hair, the ponytail, mounted into here, and then this stuck into the head. So we don't really need that bit. So we're going to cut that off, but it's going to then have a hole in the bow. I'm going to go ahead and try a different tool for this. Demonstrate some parts for the rotary tool here. So I'm going to use this little cutoff disc. So basically what these guys, it has a button you push to kind of lock the drive in place so you can unscrew the chuck and tighten it down there. Okay. Let's see what we got here. So there we go. It's kind of a rough cut. Thing to remember with these guys, um, if you're using the rotary tool for anything, the plastic does tend to warm up pretty quickly, so it's going to melt stuff the longer it has contact with things, and then you end up with kind of the little flashed bits that we'll have to, of course, clean up and remove. And this Maduka bow is actually a much more rubbery material than most other Nendoroid parts, really. So it's a little bit harder to work with. Okay. Okay, now the rest of that we'll clean up by basically molding some putty over it. And then we won't have to worry about doing any of that other cleanup in there. So we'll do a little bit of the two-part epoxy here. Which is always fun getting into these packages, isn't it? There we go. So this stuff lasts for quite a while. We actually have some more laying around here that's still pretty viable, but I wanted to go with a fresh batch for this purpose. But it does stick on here pretty good. So we're just gonna grab a little glob here, stick it on our cutting board, and then just wrap her back up. Don't want it to dry out. There we go. Now with this stuff, epoxy can be kind of hazardous, so a lot of times it's smart to use gloves if you're going to handle it a lot, or just use a tool, bottom of your X-Acto knife or a sculpting tool or something to kind of mix it up, so you're minimizing your direct handling of it when you can. And always wash your hands real thoroughly after you're using it. Now, the other option, other than Milliput, there's all kinds of different two-part epoxies out there. Another leading one is called Green Stuff, and it's basically a two-part that's yellow and blue, which is nice because when you mix it together, it of course turns green, and that'll let you know that it's all mixed together real well. Some other ones, the additive, the hardening agent is black. So when you mix the white and the black together, it'll come out gray. So it gives you a little better indicator that everything is molded together real well, or mixed together well. This one, you just kind of have to play it by ear. Just kind of mix it around a while. Just get the extra off there. So there you have a little ball of it, and as you can see, it leaves a lot of residue when it's initially molded. It's pretty sticky stuff. So before I actually start working on a part with it, I like to let it sit aside for a little bit and kind of dry. Once it dries a little bit initially, then it's a little less sticky and a little easier to work with. Okay, so basically once we get that stuff put in there, we're probably gonna rotate the hair. Probably put it on there. Or maybe we'll stick it on the Ahogu that way. Yeah, there we go. I like that idea. We'll stick it on there and then just kind of glue it flatly down So we won't need a whole lot of material around it. And in fact, we'll just be doing a lot of kind of tool fill in that little hole around the hoge to kind of patch it into place. Probably glue it in place first. Now the outfit actually already kind of has some features that make it look lion-like, and we don't really need those. They are three-dimensional on there, so we might actually just go ahead and file those down. So it's always a good idea when you're going to work on, filing down parts to minimize as much of the other parts from what you're working on so you don't accidentally file down something you don't want to. Let's see here. So you can either file or even cut the majority of it off first. There's a little less to file with. And then, of course, always be careful with the X-Acto knife. I've had a fair number of gnarly cuts over the years. So always take it slow and don't force with the blade. Just kind of scrape a little bit, dig a little bit, but if it catches too much, then try a different angle. We may live and breathe and bleed Nendoroids, but let's not do it literally, right? So one thing when you're filing parts down, it's always the question of when's it good to stop? Obviously by feel, if it feels smooth to the touch. I found too that when you're filing something down, once you start kind of stripping the paint off that's right around the thing that you're filing down, then it's starting to get pretty flush, with the paint around it, and that's a good indicator that it's that you've done enough. Let's try a little bit of sandpaper here. Now with this, we're gonna, of course, be doing the repainting, and I think what we're gonna end up doing is just trying to match the paint as best we can, and not replacing it too extensively, just to kind of clean up what we're working on. We're not gonna do a different, color palette or anything. It's gonna stay lion yellow. I should show some of the other customs that we've made. Yeah, that's pretty good. The rough sandpaper will strip stuff away pretty quickly. You can also use the rotary tool with a variety of different bits. Just whatever tool you think feels best to you and gets the best results. Different things work better for different people. So we're gonna smooth out some of that rough sanding here with the high grit, really fine sandpaper. This stuff, when you use it on wood and several passes, will basically make the wood feel like glass, super smooth. And this basically is going to help just kind of re-smooth the surface, so once you paint, it's going to look like it was molded that way. And then these features won't show through the next coat of paint. Our cat is demanding lunch. How dare you eat without feeding him?
He wasn't harassing me while I was up there. Okay.
Because he was down here harassing me. Which he's good at. So if anybody who is watching, anybody working on any customizations themselves, or have any questions on anything, feel free to chime in. I'm glancing over periodically to see if there's anything going on in the chat, or if you have any questions about what I'm currently working on. Okay, so I think those are pretty good. Seem to be pretty smoothed down. Not going to get in the way. And then we'll just have our bow kind of glued down here and then patched up. So we can actually put our hoagie back on. Let's see how that's going to work. There we go. And those parts aren't in the way. And make sure it rotates forward. Okay. So in these cases, we will want to repaint this stuff before we glue down anything, because getting kind of underneath all that stuff to repaint can be kind of touchy. So we'll avoid that fuss and try and come up with a good paint for this. All right, so before we do that though, we're actually gonna go ahead and get this bow off. So we'll take off the arms. Okay, so the bow I think is going to pop off pretty easily, as it is not, of course, molded directly to the figure. It's just glued in, so not a problem there. And then whenever you have a light color area that you're going to repaint with a similar light color, if there's any bleed over of darker colors, it's always a good idea to kind of try and scrape or sand those off, just because the darker colors are harder to conceal with a light paint color. Unless, of course, you're going to, just reprime the whole thing. A lot of times with these modifications, we don't need to do any repriming, because a lot of times, even when you're stripping it down to the plastic, there's enough of a texture in the plastic itself that it doesn't really need priming. And even then, you can do, instead of spraying, you can just get a brush-on primer, and that just kind of coat the darker areas so that they're concealed when you go to repaint it. Alrighty, so this one, we're just going to use a little bit of our putty, and I'm going to look at what tools I've got here in my massive tool tray. Here's my airbrush. A variety of different sculpting tools. Maybe I'll put them in other places. Let's see here. So I'll need a color wheel. Yeah, that should work. So, got a basic sculpting tool here that has a little kind of cup piece at the end here, which is nice for kind of scooping out clay and stuff, and the rounded back of it's good for kind of pushing things into little recesses. So I'm just going to cut a little glob of the putty and press it firmly over the hole here, and then use the back of the spoon to kind of shift stuff around and kind of fill the hole. Pull off some of the excess. Okay. So here at this stage with the putty, a lot of times you're just kind of overbuilding. You're kind of filling it and then kind of leaving extra stuff at the surface. I was trying to kind of clean up some of the excess mess that kind of trails off, but leaving basically kind of a little bit of a bigger mound of material there, and then just letting this dry for a little while. And when this gets harder, then it loses its stickiness, like I mentioned before, and then you can kind of come back through and push and kind of press everything in there a little more tightly, and it'll fill in all the corners of the gaps and stuff. And then let it dry fully, and then you can sand it down and give it a nice smooth finish again. And then with this, you have your kind of characteristic animal oval shape around the belly here. Once that's all dry, you can then take a tool and just, even with this tool, and just kind of scrape, or an X-Acto blade, and kind of dig the little pattern edge of it all the way over through the putty, so that you have that kind of that firm line cresting over the top there. So we'll just let that guy sit for a bit. Okay. Now this little bow, actually, that I popped off of here, is actually probably going to serve the purpose of what I was going to use the Renka bow for on the Tin Man. I was just going to stick it on the little hat here. So I may actually be able to save that piece and put it back in on the shop. So that bow will keep set aside there. Can never be sure whether or not something that you're stripping off is going to be salvageable, or if it's something that's going to end up just getting completely carved up and not usable. But in this case, it looks like we can repurpose it, which is always nice. So there we go. So with the bow removed, it looks like the metal will lay down flush nicely. Okay. So now let us look at paints and see what we can get going here that might match this. Clean up some of my excess lion bits that we do not need, such as the extra limbs and the bowl and chopsticks. Okay. Arms, metal. Let's slide some of those out of the way. Alright, so grab our paint palette here. Now let's see if I can manage to come up with a color that will be similar to this. Now it does look like what they've done is basically painted this with a lighter yellow, and then they've gone back over and kind of spray airbrushed it with a little bit darker brown. So the sunny yellow here can be a decent base for it, and then we'll just darken it up a little bit. Just shake that up really good. Let's see. Got a desert yellow. Let's see what we got here. That might work. I'll test that out. Should start doing this like a Bob Ross No mistakes, just happy little accidents. Hopefully we won't have any happy little accidents. Don't like happy little accidents when it comes to converting. It either works or it doesn't. Okay. So let's see what kind of mess we can make here. Pull out our fresh brushes here. So I'm going with a size number 1. This is kind of in the middle of the pack size wise. Don't really need ultra tiny stuff, and the bigger stuff at this point probably will be overkill, but yeah, maybe we'll go with something a little heavier. Let's go with a 4. A little more brush to work with. So we're just gonna kind of mix this up on the palette. A little drop of each of those, and that looks about like the main part of the mane almost. Let's see. Oh no, that actually matches real well. So when it comes to paint, you want to go with thin layers as much as possible. If you go too thick, then it ends up textured, and it's kind of, leaves a kind of topography on the figure. You can add just a touch of water to it to kind of help give it a little more motility. They also sell paint medium in a bottle that's basically helps extend it and thin it, because if you thin the paint too much, then the result is going to be a mess. It's going to leave a lot of bubbles and stuff will separate, and you won't get as clean of a coat. So I generally haven't really used the thinning medium. I generally don't really paint in thin enough layers to really warrant it, though I should, because that's the best way to go. But especially with light colors, you definitely want to make sure that you are, when you thin it out, it's going to be really thin like this. Yellow is notoriously bad for being an easy paint to put on for coverage, because it's going to basically take several little coats before you can really get a solid consistency. Because right now we're getting pretty decent coverage, but then we're going to have to let this dry for just a few minutes, and then we go back, do another layer. Eventually it kind of builds up on itself and gives you a nice smooth coat. It's going to be a lot more consistent. And then of course, you'll repaint pretty much all of this lion cowl to get it to kind of match through. So, getting there. A little water. Let's see, how's this gonna look? Okay, that's not bad. So this paint is slightly darker than the original color, but that is okay because when it dries, paint tends to lighten up just a little bit. So I think that it will come out pretty comparable to where I won't have to do too much to make everything match well. Just gonna pull that ahoke off there. So the other good thing with when you thin down the paint is that a lot of times you can just uh, kind of feather the thickness of the paint from the area that you're wanting to cover to the area that you're wanting to match. So you start thicker up here, and then as you thin it, it kind of dissolves into the existing color, so it kind of becomes more of a gradient that essentially kind of conceals any variance in the color of the paint between what you're putting on and what was there before. But I'm going to just probably end up, repainting the whole surface because I think they did do some dry brushing on here, which is hard to match to because it is a gradient by default. So okay, so now you can see kind of in here that we still have quite a bit of patchy stuff from where we, filed down whatnot, but then this is all kind of smoother. So we'll just let this stuff dry for a little bit and then come back, do some more coats, and then that stuff will all eventually get fully concealed in there and have a nice solid color again. Alrighty, so, and then as far as the milliput goes, this is going to take a while, to dry. So we're going to wait, let that solidify a bit, and keep working on it with the tools and pack that in, and then give it overnight to cure before we start cutting and sanding on it to smooth it out. So the nice thing with working on these four figures is that when we get to a point of no progress, where we're basically waiting for paint to dry or waiting for putty to solidify, we can set that stuff aside and move on to the next one, which is kind of nice. So let's see here. Do we have anything else that we can do for the lion and while we're waiting? I don't believe so. So I will go ahead and just tuck him off to the side here a little bit. And I think we'll go ahead and pull out the Tin Man. I'm going to go ahead and remove his arms here. Oh, I think this is funny. So this one, we're going to see if we can do a little bit of trim, a little bit of cleanup on here, because we got some paint transfer from when this was shipped to us by somebody. I'm going to grab a magic eraser here. Just one sec. Ready. So magic erasers are pretty handy. They're good for cleaning up Nendoroids pretty well. You do want to be real careful with them because they can strip off paint really easily. Over white surfaces, they do great. Black, they will kind of leave kind of a satin sheen finish to it, which you can kind of take out by using a spray matte coat. And that can kind of eliminate that shine a little bit. Over yellows and browns, you want to avoid like the plague, because it will take it off and you'll end up with different shades, and it just makes a mess. Here on this guy, though, I think it's going to work pretty well. Because this is, I think it's mostly silver plastic, not just paint. So, came off nicely. It's always a shame, though, when we have to do this to brand new figures that we've just taken out of a package, because quality control has been kind of crappy on some figures that we've had to clean up some mint, quote-unquote, figures. A couple little bits here and there. There we go. Good as new. Now we can rusty you up and make you weathered in the way we want you to. Very nice. Okay, so I forgot. The lower part comes off too. Turns at the waist. It's a funny figure. Okay. So I think before I start doing any kind of paint work on this, I think we're going to actually look at the plastic card that I mentioned before. And that is, let's go ahead and cover up our paint palette here so it doesn't dry out. The plastic card I mentioned before is really useful material, and it's basically thin sheets of plastic that come in a variety of thicknesses. So here's one that's pretty thick, and these ones are thinner. Different flexibilities, based on what purpose you need them for. This is a great way to basically model little features onto figures without using putty, because honestly, I'm not that great of a sculptor. So using something that I can create sharp shapes with, using the plastic card is always a plus. I did a custom Menma, or not Menma, Nene. All these names. I did a custom Nene from Toilet Bound Hanako-kun for April for her birthday this last year. And and so basically I ended up using the plastic card quite a bit around the collar area to kind of create her little uniform there. And then I also used it to create the pockets there on her dress. Basically just cut out the shapes and then cut out another layer for the pleat, the fold over of the pocket, just in two little pieces, a little rectangle, a little U-shaped piece, and just glued them right down with super glue. And then after it dries, then you just basically sand around the base of it here and kind of smooth it into the dress itself. And it worked out really well. And the plastic card over her shoulders basically just goes all the way along the back as well. So handy stuff. So in this particular instance, we're going to be using the plastic card to create a little funnel for his hat, basically. Now, I'm sure there's probably some other Nendoroid parts that might suit that need, like a megaphone or something to that effect, but I'm going to use different parts. Now, I'm going to probably pick something kind of medium thickness. Hello.
Hello. I'm going to interrupt for a minute.
Uh-huh.
Did you split... Oh, I guess there's 6. 6 of these are news?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. All right, that's a good one. Now, you want something, you know, a Goldilocks thickness. Something not too thick, not too thin, just right. Because you want it to be rigid enough that it's going to hold up and not dent after you've built it, and still be something that's pretty pliable, so that you can actually wrap it into the shape you want. Yeah, so let's see, how am I going to do this? So I think I'm just going to wrap that up into a tight tip. There we go. So just wrap it up into a cone as best I can. And then I'm going to take a pencil. Draw a basic line. All the way around it there. It's not too bad. Let's see, actually, let's extend that out that way more. There we go. So there's our basic cone. A lot of glare. I think it's our window. Okay. So there, basically, looks like we're taking our half circle. Yeah, in fact, we'll just use that as a vague guide and then get something around. See how that fits on there. Yeah, that'll be pretty tight. Then we just take our X-Acto blade and kind of score it as deeply as we can without having to cut too far into it. If you get it in one pass, then it's, you know, a lot cleaner of a cut. There we go. So there we got our half circle. Fold the corners together and just draw the tip here as tight as you can. Yeah, I'll probably do some fill in there for that. Okay, let's see here. So there's our little funnel hat. Now, you might want to actually move this in a little, yeah, do that a little broader so it's a little wider flare there. That will be good. So then we'll just take our super glue. Now the neat thing with this stuff, you can get a heat gun or even a hair dryer or some super hot water and just dip it in the water or apply some heat on it in order to bend the shapes more. You don't really need it for kind of moderate thickness plastic card, but for like the heavier gauge stuff, if you're trying to bend that stuff, It's handy to have that. This I probably won't need any kind of help with that. Always trying to figure out the best fit. It's like the old carpenter rule. Measure twice, cut once, right? Ah, shoot. Slippery stuff. Okay, so got that glued together. Just hold that there for a little bit. Now, the thing with super glue I find is that you really want really fresh glue. I think this Zap-A-Gap is getting a bit stale, so it's harder to get it to stick to anything but skin. Forever and always will stick to skin. But having some little pinchers would be helpful if I had like a little butterfly clip or something. Let's see, do I have anything? I don't think I do. The most fun part of the process, right? Waiting for glue to dry. No, it's not working. Okay. I think this glue may be about shot. Okay, so plan B. Use a little bit of epoxy. Using the Milliput can be used as a glue. There we go. Just putty that into place. Yep. Epoxy can be used as an adhesive as well. So, handy dandy. Okay. And we'll just keep holding that and let that dry off for a little while. Look at our drawer here. I have a tube of crazy glue. That might actually work better. Here's an example, but not the right size I need. That little butterfly clips, the smaller versions of these, are kind of handy to basically use as clamps. I don't know, maybe this one will work. Yeah, that'll work okay. There we go. So now that'll hold that in place and dry. In fact, we'll put a little more glue. Zap that gap. And then we'll just set that over here, let it dry. Okay. Now, the plastic card here. we're gonna make a little the neck of the funnel, just a short little piece. Longer than that though. So we got our little piece, and let's see. Yeah, we'll just take a brush, wrap it around the brush to create a little cylinder, basically, like so. And then when we glue that little piece together, that will be the wind up as the tip of the funnel. Alternately, any little bit of plastic will work for that. A little piece of modeling sprue sanded down, or any other spare Nendoroid part that you don't need. That's the same shape, would fit that pretty well. Yeah, you betcha. And thanks for coming and joining us, Steve. Are you working on any kind of customs, or do you just collect Nendoroids? Just having a messy time here with this good old super glue. Yeah. Okay, let's get those two pieces glued and clamped. Hopefully they will dry and serve the purpose we need. Okay. Yeah, let's see where we're at. Okay. I'll be working on the hat. Let's take a look at the heart and the axe and the oil can. There is the oil can. Here's the heart. Now, if I had a Ramaram, the mace that she has with the chain on it, if I had the real metal chain, that would be handy. You could do a little loop of the heart-shaped pocket watch sticking on there. But I don't at the moment. Any other little chain would work too, like just a cheap costume jewelry necklace. But we just pop that little piece off of there, no problem. And then all I'm going to do for this guy, I think I'm going to actually use plasticart as well, is make a little disc to do the round clock face on there. Do I want to do it? Do I want to embed it? Or just sculpt something on there. Maybe I'll just sculpt something on there. Let's try a little glob of the putty. Boom. Take the heart. We'll just stick that on there. Use the flat of the blade to kind of flatten it out. So there we got our basic shape with the face of the clock, which we'll paint on there. When this goes to dry a bit more, then we can kind of do some more fine-tuned sculpts to it, like doing a little bit of a feature line along the face, so that it just looks a bit more sunken in the middle. And then we'll just kind of dab it down here along the sides. Get the edges kind of flush with the heart. Give it a little more solid points of contact for the milliput to bind to. There we go. Okay. I think that works pretty well. And then we'll just let that dry. And then after that dries, we can kind of file it down and continue to shape it more. So it's a little bit more flush with the heart. It's better to always kind of build a little bit bigger and then kind of taper it down after it's dried. Okay. Let's see where we're at here. I got the... Okay, let's go ahead, cover up our glue here. And then we'll shift back over to the lion, do some more painting. Let's see, where did I set my brush? Brush, who's got the brush? There you are. Okay. Add some more water. So one important thing with painting, especially in thin layers, is not to overpaint. If you paint too much, then you end up kind of dragging some more of the pigment off of the surface, and then it becomes harder to cover again, because then the edges of what you've pulled away kind of tend to show up a little bit more. So in that case, it's always best to just add a little bit of extra water to the brush and kind of just, move it around and kind of drag it off as best you can to kind of clear the area. And then add some more coloration here. Kind of try and blend it as much as you can. And then when in doubt, let it dry, because you can always, things don't end up looking right after it dries and you can't get the right coverage you're looking for, you can always take really fine sandpaper and kind of sand over it and start again. And that doesn't make you have to repaint the whole thing, just kind of around that area, as you just kind of blend things into the next area of color. I think I need to put up a big piece of cardboard in this window, because the window is right over here, and I think all of the light is tending to wash out the image. Okay. And also another important rule when painting is, if you're gluing parts together, don't even think about coming anywhere near it with a brush. One touch with a brush and you've ruined that brush if it happens to get any of the glue on it. So it's always best to set that stuff aside until you know it's, fully been dried. Okay, let's see here. I need another brown to mix with this yellow brown color so I can touch up the rest of the mane. So that's a little bit dark, so just take some here, mix it. That's not too bad. Just kind of touching up the spot that I ended up grinding a little bit. We're doing the sanding and filing. A little more of this. It's gonna need a little more reddish color to it, I think. Yeah. This is where, more often than not, you end up having to do a little bit more repainting because you can't quite match the color exactly, which is tricky to do. So you just test new colors, see what works, see what doesn't. Yeah, that'll be okay. We'll just repaint the mane a little bit more of a brown color. Not too bad. Now this little technique here is kind of a hybrid of dry brushing, where you're just kind of flicking the brush across the surfaces, and it tends to give you a little bit easier coverage and also blends better with the color that's underneath it, and generally requires the paint to be thinned down a little bit. Not too bad. Getting there. Okay. Too bad there. Okay. That. And we'll finish another coat on here. There we go. It's starting to smooth together more. Just takes a lot of coats sometimes. Okay. So we are good on that for the time being. Okay. So that is lion painting. Okay. Now let's shift over to the Scarecrow hat for a little bit here. See what we can come up with for this. I think what I'm going to do is have a seam line kind of carved into the side there. That kind of goes all the way down the edge. And there's a few ways that you can achieve that. Now, one way is with a scraper tool. And this actually already has a mold line that kind of runs along that same path, which is going to be handy to use as a guideline. So we're just kind of carving in the So then the intention here is basically just to kind of carve a big groove in the side of the hat here, and then we're going to lay little bits of we'll probably use putty, maybe little strips of plastic card to kind of make the stitching that kind of goes over it. Just kind of big rough stitches. Okay, so that's one method using that. it gives a little less control than the other method, which is the rotary tool. And let's see what bit we want to use for this. Now, most rotary tool sets that you get, we're going to knocking you out of the way here. Retighten the camera arm here. There we go. There we go. Okay. Sorry about that. Now, most rotary tools that you buy come with a kit that has a variety of different kinds of little grinder and digging bits, little files for metal or for woodwork. We'll try this little tip here. And they also sell just standalone bit kits. And the places like Home Depot and Lowe's also have them. And you can actually buy individual bits. So it's not going to be too loose. And they have different little collar inserts. You just take the screw down chuck off, and then it has this little insert that's the piece that actually grabs the bit. I'll go grab my tray that has these. And they come in different sizes depending on the bit that they're going to hold. Let's see here. Maybe that one. No, that's too big. Okay. So you can kind of see the inside diameters are different. Yeah, that should work. There, put that in there. Screw that down. There we go. Okay. Yeah. There we got our basic seam line there along the hat. Yeah, I think that'll be good. And then we'll just grab a file here and kind of file off the excess. And the nice thing with this particular conversion is that you don't need it to be sharp and perfect. because it's a Scarecrow, and this is rough fabric that it's being made out of. So there we go. That looks pretty good. Okay. Now we're gonna let's see. Now we're gonna do some trim in the cutting up of the edge of the hat here a little bit. It's pretty pliable, but I think it's a little thick to be using the X-Acto knife for that. Just safety-wise, it's a little bit easier, and you apply a little less force. So we'll switch our bits out here and go back to the cutting bit wherever it may be. There we go. Okay. So there's that. And we're going to go high speed, so there we go. Easy peasy. Cut in, and then we'll tidy up some of that loose plastic. And again, that happens when the sanding bit stays on the plastic. It tends to leave behind the melted flash. Of the cut, so just gotta take a knife and cut some of it off. You can take sandpaper, kind of rougher grade, and just kind of wipe it off pretty much. And then you can, of course, use files in the grooves to kind of clean up. The X-Acto knife to kind of help find the cuts a little better. Now the thickness of the cutter, the cutting wheel, will obviously basically end up leaving it, pretty broad at the end. If you want it to like cut, further back and taper all along the way, then you just kind of continue the cut with the X-Acto knife. I'll do it to one of these little ones here. Cut down the middle. Then kind of flare it off to the sides. There we go. So there, we get it kind of cut back into a little bit more of a V shape. Hard to tell on this camera, of course, but there we go. Cut a little wedge out of there a little more. So I'm gonna just kind of do a few little nicks along the rim, just kind of randomly, that don't cut in too far. And there you got a pretty weathered Scarecrow hat pretty well. So yeah, I'm liking how that's coming together. Might do another seam along the other side here to match. Not too bad. Alrighty, so that's the Scarecrow hat. Now let's see here. See, I would have optimally for his head just gone with a doll custom head, but we don't have any in stock right now. Because I just realized looking at this, his arrow on his head is actually a molded element, so that'll have to be sanded off, which is unfortunate because that's more work to do. I don't think I have any other blank faces that have the full forehead. So yeah, oh well. We'll just have to sand her down. This one will just... Yeah, that won't take too much effort, hopefully. At least it's color coded. Once you don't see any more blue, you know you've sanded it all off. It should be pretty flush with the skin at that point. Aang looks annoyed. And again, rough is fine, because the face is just a sack, a burlap sack. I thought using the head from Sackboy would be an optimal option, but that has not released for us yet. And the ones that are out there are like 80 bucks, so I'm making do with what we got on hand. But that just shows you how versatile Nendoroids can actually be, because there's lots of different ways that you can do these customizations and still have them turn out pretty cool. Here I'm just kind of broad chunking, whittling plastic off. And then I'll get in there with the sandpaper a little more closely to clean it up some more. And it's okay if I sand the eyeballs too, because that I'm going to use some acetone to Get rid of the eyeballs as well. We essentially want to have a fully blank base plate to work with here. So this is where you definitely use the lower grit rating, which is a much rougher sandpaper, because you want it to strip off the features as best you can. So that's coming off pretty well. Not too bad. Yeah. Another pro tip: never mix up your paint cup with your drink cup. Definitely not a nice surprise when you take a drink and you grab your paint cup, or you go to rinse off your brush in your water, in your drinking water. Now, decontouring heads. A lot of leftover color from the sanding of the lion head. That dust will transfer, but it'll wash off easily. There we go. That's buffing down okay. Go ahead and separate the head parts here. I'm going to be sanding right down here by where the neck joint is. Let's see here. Let's see what other tools I got here. Is it bad when I'm too lazy to change a bit on a Dremel? No, I'd rather just sand. Let's see if I got another piece in here. There we go. Grab a fresh chunk. Oh, Aang, why does your face paint have to be three-dimensional? Hello.
Hello.
Taking a break.
Yes. I got the meat foods I use up.
That's nice.
Oh, no, maybe I didn't because there's still such that.
This happens to us quite a bit. Okay. Enough of that for the moment. Okay. Also, another tip. Don't file over things that are drying. Yeah. Some stuff we're going to have to clean up here a little bit. Okay. Bit of that. How do you like the converted Scarecrow hat?
Oh, the edges look really good. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
I can see the vision more now than I did before.
Yeah. Well, the neat thing too on that is you can kind of flare the where the cuts are a bit, kind of flip pieces up and down. And with all this kind of stuff, anytime you want to like reposition or warp things, really hot water works really well. Just get it in there, soak it for just a few seconds, and then you can pull things out, bend it into the shape that you want, and then put it in really cold water, and then it'll relax there and kind of go back and forth to between the hot and the cold, kind of reinforcing the positioning you want, and then eventually it'll relax in that placement that you have modified it for.
When you get the Scarecrow done, you should do a solo photo shoot of it and have some crows around it.
Yeah.
Around him.
Cute.
Or her, I guess. In this
Yeah.
case.
Indeed.
You're messing up my reverse harem. You're making it a Yuri.
Yeah. I guess I am.
Or cute girls doing cute things.
Could be. Okay. Alright, let's shift back over and do blow some stuff out of the way here. Do a little more coating on the Cowardly Lion. Yeah. So you can, I don't know if you can kind of see here, a little bit of bubbles building up. That's from the water thinning out the paint a little too much. In which case you just drag a little more pigment into the paint and go over it again. So another tip with repainting, if you have like one solid color that's going to be predominant on a large piece, it just makes more sense to go ahead and spray paint it that color. It's because the brush painting takes time if you want it to end up with a nice solid clean coat, because you have to do so many separate little layers to get it to look good. But with the spray stuff, that'll go on pretty quick. The airbrush is a good option, but it takes a lot of practice to get the airbrush technique down. And honestly, you get what you pay for with an airbrush. And if you don't spend a good amount on a decent airbrush, then they're really finicky to work with. The ones I've had have all been kind of janky. The current one's okay, but I still haven't quite gotten the knack down to it.
It clogs a lot,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, it does. Yeah,
Clogging.
it clogs up a bit. It's hard to clean and transition between colors. I haven't quite gotten the hang of, because it comes with airbrush cleaner that's supposed to not stay in the airbrush, but somehow it always ends up still stuck in the airbrush, and then you go to spray with something and then it sputters and spits out the cleaner and water and other paint. It just makes a mess. Airbrush artist I am not. I can do some basic coverage stuff, but when it comes to detail work, it's definitely a skill that requires lots of patience and work. There, getting that coating pretty good. A little too much yellow in that. Had to mix it together a little bit. Okay, I think we're getting there on. So we basically filed off all of the eyeball and nose features that were on the top here, and smoothed it down and repainted. And then I've had to repaint the mane around it a little bit. So we'll set that up here out of the way to dry. That's bad. Rinse out a brush. And another tip too, when you're rinsing the brush, never leave the brush sitting in the container, because that will bend the bristles and cause your brush to curl a lot quicker.
And he will yell at you if you do that.
Yes,
I have experienced this because he was not nice enough to tell me that.
I did tell you.
Not until after I did it, and then I got told that's not good for the brushes.
I wasn't tutoring you at that point. You were just doing your thing, and I went, "Oh, hey, you should avoid that."
Yeah.
That's right.
He likes to tell me things after I've already screwed up.
That's right. Corrective assistance.
That's right.
Alrighty. So now looking here, we got our putty here in the lion. And now this stuff is quite a bit firmer, because it's been sitting here for a couple hours now. And then can kind of peel off some of the excess. It's still pretty tacky. The milliput stuff doesn't really dry terribly quickly, so it's definitely a do over a period of time kind of task. There we go. So now I'm just kind of trying to smooth it out and kind of thin down the putty a little bit. Just kind of pressing the stuff to make sure it's filling the groove that we put it in well. Okay, there's not much more we can do to this until it cures. So in the next video we'll come back to it and do a file down and reshape it and finish that part up. Alrighty, let's see here. Now we've got our little oil can that we're going to use.
Oil can.
Oil can. That's right. Now I think with this one we're just going to kind of see what kind of positioning we can do for it in the claw hand. Maybe, there we go. There's something like that where he's holding it. There we go. There. That grabby claw hand works pretty good for this. Oil can. Go. Got our oil can and our axe slung over the shoulder. Yeah, it's gonna look good. Okay. Again, I'm just keeping the parts off of them because I'm gonna be doing some weathering paint on it here eventually. And then we got our little parts that we worked on with Plasticard a little bit ago. That is, of course, glued to the clip. Of course it is. Why would I expect anything else? Super glue. How much I love you. There we go. So that's gonna be our our little oil can hat, our little funnel hat. And I think this tube idea might need some rethinking. Let's see. That might work. Yeah, that should work okay. So we glue that and then we'll prime it. And then with this, we're probably going to use some putty and then we'll just patch in that hole. So we still have a little bit of putty here. So we'll flatten out a bit of a piece. Just gonna pat that down, smooth it over. So some of this stuff's just trial and error, seeing what works and what doesn't. So we will put a little glue down in here and then let this sit and dry. And then next time we'll be able to sand it down and mount it on the head there. Just like that. Kind of a big funnel. I might actually just trim a big chunk of the funnel off so it sits a little lower on the head and it's a little smaller. I think that would be sensible. Meow meow. Meow. Oh yes, your life is awful. Has he been fed?
Not by me.
Ah, then that's
But
probably it.
Well, he quit complaining, so I thought maybe somebody else fed him.
No, he just calms down eventually and gets patient.
Resigns to his fate.
Exactly. They're clearly going to try and starve me. Let's see. Do I have any snips? Okay. So I just have a pair of little sprue cutters and I'll use to trim my way up through the plastic card here. There we go. It's like trying to work with straight tin snips. How appropriate. There we go. There, that's better. A little smaller. It's good. Oh boy. Hate it when you can't see the super glue. And it just pours out. Okay. So we're going to let that guy dry for like a week. There we go. Okay. So now, what we got going here? Superfluous parts that we do not need. Yeah, we'll just use up the rest of this putty and making some little stitch work for the hat. For the Scarecrow hat here. Basically just gonna take a little bit of putty and make Play-Doh snakes, basically. Tiny little Play-Doh snakes and stick them to the side of the hat. Except the side of the hat is dusty from being sculpted on, so Just wipe it down.
Where do we put the old tear parts?
Oh, just throw them away. In the garbage outside. So there. We just stick a bit of putty on the side there. Make another one. Just crisscross it. Just like so. So we'll just stick a couple of those little single or X stitches kind of along the side here in a couple of spots. Give it that kind of patchwork hodgepodge look. This stuff always sticks to people more than it wants to stick to plastic at first. Yeah. But once it cures, it'll be stuck on there for good. And then you can always use some tools to kind of adjust the shapes a little bit. Kind of better define them. Cute. There we go. That looks pretty good. We'll do another one down here and call that good. Yep, Thoughtful Freedom. We're doing customizations of the four main characters from Wizard of Oz. And this is the Scarecrow's hat, and then Tin Man from Wizard of Oz, and we've got a Cowardly Lion and Dorothy in the works. Haven't done anything with Dorothy yet, so I might pull that up next. Just kind of jumping back and forth between all four of them at the same time because of the different steps involved. Sometimes waiting for bits to dry. Go. Looks pretty good. And I'll probably do like a little patch type of thing over here. Might just engrave that. Cutter, I think. Get it thick. So we just have this there. I'm streaming. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. That there. Oops. Bumped the stitching. There we go. Okay, so that bit I used is a little bit broad. So that doesn't look quite as good as I wanted it to. But that's okay. Would have used one of the little grinder bits that are a little bit thinner. When a little fine wood chisel would work out here. Kind of dig out the groove. The only other thing I have to kind of contemplate is what kind of color scheme I want to do for the Scarecrow. That there, and just trim down some of the excess. Actually reposition it. Get an extra stitch out of it there. Oops. Sticky stuff. There we go. Go. Definitely a challenge sometimes. There. I've got a little patch stitched on. That's looking pretty good. Alrighty, so next we got the head we're still working on here. We're trying to file down the airbender symbol on his Aang's head. That is a three-dimensional feature, which I didn't realize at first. Little elbow grease. Right down here. Oops. Getting there. Okay. Alright, so we'll just have to acetone the eyes off there and resculpt a wide smile and find some little buttons to use for the eyeballs. I was going to use a faceplate from Gardner, but we didn't have any of the faceplates in stock. They have a whole actual modeled button eyeballs. That would have been cute for this. Excuse me, Abby. A guinea pig nibbling on the side of her enclosure.
Are you out of water?
Maybe she is. Alrighty.
Oh, you have water. Quit being silly.
Alrighty. Well, I think that I am at a good stopping point for now. We have got the lion's mane that has been retouched. Had the features removed off of the top of it there. The bow was stripped off the front there so that we can have the courage medallion lay flush and the bow not get in the way. I've got to wait for that to cure and then we can file that all down. We got a bow from Madoka all prepped, which the Hoge is going to go through like so and be put back on the top of the lion's mane. And then we got the Tin Man in progress. We got his Takikama arms. Got his oil can in hand and his axe can be easily held. Ready to go. And then we just have the funnel that we are waiting for it to dry and cure so we can keep working on sculpting that. Got our Scarecrow head in progress, filing down the three-dimensional features, and got the hat nicely converted with a lot of weathering effects and little patchwork features on it. That'll be ready to prime and paint after it's all cured up and ready to go. Let's see here if we've got something to look at for the, let's look at the hair for Dorothy. So, like I mentioned in the intro, the hair parts aren't going to fit together on their own, so we're basically going to have to do some reduction on the inside here, grinding down some parts. So for that, I'm going to use a metal grinding bit right here for the Dremel tool. Now, another way you can do it is carefully with an X-Acto knife and hand chisels or files and that kind of thing. But I think that method's going to be a little arduous. So, just going to use this and see what we can reduce here. Flying bits. Jeez. Super glue on my fingers. And I can't keep a hold of anything. I just test fit a bit more. Kind of look under and see where the pieces are not fitting right. Keep working them. Wait. Keeps jumping. Okay, this side here is fitting in a little better now. But we still got quite a bit to reduce on this side. Interesting contours, how they've modeled this. Getting there. Starting to fit a little bit. Yeah, thing with trying to resize these things to fit is that you always want to remember that you can always take away more. It's harder to put stuff back. So just kind of trim a little at a time, test fit it, and trim a little more until you start seeing what parts are starting to fit into place and what parts aren't. There we go. That's getting there. A little more here. There we go. Not bad. All right. So we got our side pieces in place. We're touching here. And this part's going to all be filled in with putty once we get to that point. And then we'll resculpt the front of the hair. And then that will be the basic shape. Alrighty. Well, I think for now I'm going to go ahead and call it quits for this week. And next week, same time, Saturday at noon Pacific, we'll be picking up where we left off and moving on down the line and doing some more converting of these Wizard of Oz anime-inspired Nendoroids. And I hope you guys can join us again next time. Thanks a lot for tuning in, and we'll catch you next week.